Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on the scrap refining process with Bravo. We are super excited to have you here. My name is Kat. My co-host here is Luis, and we'll be guiding you through today's session. So whether you're already using Bravo for scrap refining or just exploring how it works, we're here to break down the process step by step to show you how Bravo simplifies it and make sure that you walk away with a clear understanding of how to refine scrap efficiently and profitably. So today we're going to walk through and break it down into 4 key areas. First, we'll start with how to begin the scrap process. Then we'll move on to managing your scrap bucket, talk about closing out your scrap, and then finally wrap it up with some reporting. Now, throughout the session, feel free to send in your questions using Zoom chat down at the bottom, and we'll answer as many questions as we can during our Q&A at the end of the session. So before we fully dive into the scrap refining process, let's just take a quick moment to talk about bucket statuses. Now, these are going to be different stages your scrap goes through in Bravo, from when you start identifying items to when the payment is received and finalized. Now, we're going to cover the entire process in one session today, but in reality, these steps happen over time, depending on, of course, how your store handles scrap and the turnaround from your vendor. So think of this as like a timeline, not a one and done type of action. Now, one important thing to note is that as soon as an item gets put into the scrap bucket, Bravo does mark it as refined. So if you're about to do an inventory audit, those items won't get added to that inventory scan. So just a little note there. Okay, so let's dive right in. Meet Lisa. At her shop, she keeps up with pricing every single day. So as she goes through, she adds items into her scrap list as needed. Lisa also follows a monthly scrap process to keep things organized and moving swiftly. At the end of the month, she finalizes her scrap bucket and ships it out to the refinery. And within 2 days, she typically receives that confirmation email from the refinery, letting her know that they've received her shipment. About a week later, they get her, the refinery issues her payment. So now that we kind of have an idea of what Lisa's process is in her store, let's see how she handles her scrap in Bravo. So since Lisa manages her priced items queue daily, what we're going to do is we are going to hop in from there and kind of see how to identify scrap. So we're going to go ahead and bring up Bravo. And we are going to hop right into our priced items queue. So this is a great place to start because this is going to be all of the items that you're kind of pilfering through, deciding what's going to go onto your sales floor or into your cases or what you're going to end up scrapping. So the very first thing I like to do, or should I say Lisa likes to do, is kind of weed out all of the things that are non-jewelry related. Because when it comes to adding items to the scrap list, it does have to meet some criteria. One, the first thing is that it does have to be in a jewelry category. So things like bullion and coins, since they're taken as in as GM, they won't be able to be added to your scrap list. If you do scrap them, you basically would have to process it as a sale. The other thing to kind of keep in mind is that if you have any converted jewelry inventory items, they have to be run through the estimator, just linking them to a jewelry category. So since I only want to really look at my jewelry items, I'm going to hover over this category column, click the little link, and I'm only going to select my jewelry items that I want to look at. So here's all the ones that I have that I'm basically going to decide if I want to price them and put them in my case, or if I want to basically add them to my scrap list. So the very first one I have is a nameplate. It has a really unique name on it, so I know I'm not going to be able to sell this. So I'm going to simply add it to my scrap list. Now you can go through and add them one by one just by highlighting the item and clicking add to scrap list. Or, oops, almost forgot to save it. Or you can highlight one, hold down the shift key on your keyboard, select another one down in the line to select multiple items in a consecutive row. If you want to only select certain ones, you can hold down the control key on your keyboard and then just start clicking the ones that you know you're going to be scrapping. So we're going to go ahead and add these 3 to our scrap list and hit save. And then for this one, we're just going to run it through our price estimator just to clear up our queue. So we already have our price estimators already set up in the background. We're happy with where that is. I'm just going to locate it to case 1. Hit save. Go on to the next one. And after looking at this one, we're also going to scrap this one too. So I'm just going to click add to scrap list. So now that our queue is completely clean, we've marked things to add to scrap. The other thing I did was as I was going through my cases, I noticed that we had a handful of items that were just not sellable. All of them rings, all of them a size 4. So since they're hitting our age list, we're going to go ahead and just add them to our scrap list while we're taking care of our priced items queue. So on the right side menu, I'm going to head to our ad hoc reporting. I basically just said anything that's in inventory that I have already identified and located to my scrap area. I'm just going to bring those up and highlight all of them and add them to my scrap bucket. So start at the top, hold down my shift key, all the way down to the bottom and add to scrap list. And so now that we're done adding things to our scrap list, we're going to move on to our next portion. So at this point, between February 1st and February 28th, Lisa is going to basically go through and open her scrap bucket so that she can start signing things to her scrap bucket. So let's go ahead and head over to Bravo Scrap Process. So from Bravo's dashboard, we're going to navigate to the right side menu, head into our inventory section, expand it, and right into scrap refining process. When we open this screen, you're going to see all of our open and available buckets. So over here, you'll see the different statuses for all of our open buckets. To create a brand new bucket, we're just going to go ahead and click this little new bucket link here. And that's going to open up a new one for us to start. So I'm going to go ahead and name my bucket here, February 2025. Of course, you can name your buckets whatever in order to kind of identify what they are and what they mean to you. Now, with Bravo's scrap process, it was designed with structure in mind, but it works whether you're a large operation with multiple employees or a small shop where you're doing it all yourself. So for bigger teams, it supports that classic separation of duty, where one person basically pulls the forfeited item, marks them as scrapped, and then somebody else is basically doing the entire scrap process. So for them, scanning each piece into the bucket becomes their double check. It confirms that what's going in the bucket is actually what's physically going out the door to the refinery. But if you're a smaller business, and we know you don't always have that luxury of having 2 different people working on the same task, you're probably the one pulling, prepping, and shipping that scrap. So where Bravo makes it easier is instead of handling that same item over and over, we can just scan directly from our scrap list on the right side menu here. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up our scrap list. And one of the things I like to do is just show it in a separate window. So it pops that out of our Bravo so that we can see the list, but still work in that scrap refining section. So at this point, instead of having to touch each piece, I can basically just scan directly from that list that I want to add into my bucket. So I'm going to grab my scanner and I'm going to start scanning items into my scrap bucket. Already scanned that one. All right. So I have a handful of items in my scrap bucket. And as you see, as I was scanning those items in, this left-hand panel here will update with every item you add into your bucket. So at this point, it will say, these are all of the combined weights that Bravo has for as you brought that item into your store, as well as seeing what the blended gold assay is for the items that you've taken with number of stones and carat weight. Now, the only thing here is that Bravo really doesn't like when you mix metal types. So if you start putting in other metal types like platinum into your gold bucket, it would just basically say, hey, you can do this, but ultimately it's going to mess with your assay. So it's not recommended. So since we're going to be adding to this scrap bucket throughout the month, Lisa's going to go ahead and keep this open, and we're just going to save out our scrap. So the next day she's going to come in, pull her items, and she's going to basically add them in as she needs to. So let's head back to our deck here. And since we're done with opening the scrap bucket, we are going to basically head into shipping your scrap. So since it is the last day of the month, Lisa is ready to ship her scrap off to the refinery. She has everything that she's already added into her bucket. She's verified that everything looks good. And now it's time to pretty much head into that bucket SKU and update it, the status, and ship it out to her refiner. So we are going to head back into that same area now that it's the last day of the month. Expand our inventory section, head to the scrap refining process, go to our open bucket for February. And now we are going to head to the upper left-hand corner right below the name that we gave our bucket. And we're going to change the status from open to shipped. So when we change this, Bravo will lock down the bucket once we hit save. That means that she can no longer add items to that bucket or remove items from this bucket. So this step almost acts like a seal. It's a safeguard to make sure that what's been scanned and documented is actually what's being sent out the door to the refinery. So before you change the status, do a quick double check to make sure that everything that you want to add into that shipment is scanned in. We're going to take all of the items that we basically have added to our scrap list, and we are going to add or put them on our scale and weigh them so that we can add in the total weight of what is being shipped out. So we've got, let's say, 2650 in weight. The other thing that we have to do is basically say, which vendor are we sending this to? So down at the very bottom, we are going to search for and select our vendor. And we've got everything we need. We have our vendor, we've confirmed our weight, and we're going to go ahead and click save. All right. So now that is completely done with shipping it out to our vendor. We're going to package it up and we're going to send it off to our refinery. And the next thing we have to do is just wait for those next steps of receiving our confirmation email with that they've received our shipment, what the assay is, and that the weight confirmation. So on March 2nd, Lisa has received an email from her refinery with those next steps and the results. So they've received the shipment, they've provided those final weights and the assay details. Now it's time for us to head back into our Bravo scrap bucket to basically update the status from shipped to assay. So let's go ahead and head back in here. We are going to head to inventory, scrap refining process. Now that since we've marked that item as shipped, the status has updated on that bucket, so we know that's the one we're working on. We're going to click here and OK to open up our bucket. Back up to that upper left-hand corner where we can change that status to our vendor has weight confirmation. So from here, we are going to enter the weight that our vendor has received and also the assay. So this step is really important because what this allows you to do is it allows you to compare what you've sent off to them to what they've received. So for instance, let's say we have a variation in our assay. So instead of 7.75, we have maybe 0.650. So at that point, we can see that there's a difference between what Bravo is calculating our assay at versus what our vendor is calculating our assay at. And this could mean a handful of things. So I'm going to launch this little poll. And basically, when we have an assay variance, what could cause the difference between Bravo's calculated assay and the vendor's report assay? And of course, you can select multiple things in here. So, there's a handful that it could be, right? Yeah, it could be all of them, exactly. So at this point, this really allows you to kind of dig in and see what the issue is. Was it that somebody accidentally entered the wrong carrot weight? And that could be identified as a training issue with someone on your team. If you forgot to put in a piece while you were shipping it out, at that point, you could be like, oh man, I really need to lock in on my process so that you can really make sure that you are sending everything or maybe not adding too much. Mislabeling or identifying metal type, of course, the presence of gold solder is just kind of what it's going to be. And then last but not least, plated or non-precious metal items, again, a whole nother training issue. So by being able to go through and say, this is what Bravo thinks you should have as your blended assay, and seeing what your actual vendor is receiving, or I guess not receiving, but explaining to you that this is what they have, this is a really good indication of what you can do with your team to make them stronger and better in that process. All right, so at this point, we have our weight in there from our vendor. It matches completely what we have sent out, so it's not like we're missing any items. There was a bit of a variance in our assay, so at that point, we can kind of decide how we want to handle it moving forward. So we're going to go ahead and lock in those changes. Now remember, once I hit save, our bucket's locked down. We can no longer take things out of it or put things into it. It is locked down, it is safe. So now we are going to move into the final step of our process. And this is going to be, she finally receives her payment from her vendor on March 7th. So it's been a few days. She's excited to have that cash in her hand. She's ready to go. So let's head into Bravo and apply that payment. So we're going to head into inventory, head down to the scrap refining process. We're going to go into our assayed bucket that we were working with, click OK to open that bucket up. Now, before we get to marking it as received or completed, I did want to show you our print scrap report on the right side menu here. So as soon as you mark it as assayed or shipped, it's going to then tell you, hey, based on your ship date, here is what gold locked in at. And it's also going to tell you everything that you've added into your bucket, the estimated funds that you should get from your melt based on your locked in price. And then it's also going to give you weight confirmations with the variance on the assay. So it gives you a lot of information that you can kind of keep track of during that process. So now we're going to head back into that upper left-hand corner where we're going to change our status from assayed to closed. And this is where we get to put in our proceeds from the vendor. Now, I did want to highlight something very, very quickly because there's this big, big blue line, and it's kind of the thorn in our side, only because a lot of people see that invoice number, and so they want to put the invoice number of the vendor's stuff. And anytime you enter anything below this line, it's going to say, what item do you want to add back into your inventory? So if you aren't bringing anything back into your inventory, just don't complete anything below that blue line. Leave it blank. Don't be tempted to fill out that invoice number. If you really want to include the invoice number somewhere, you can always add it to your notes. Invoice A, and then it can kind of be attached to that bucket. Now, with the amount paid, this is going to be the total amount that you're receiving from your vendor. So if you are getting maybe a deposit and then another, like a wire deposit or a cash deposit and a wire later, what I would recommend doing is just bringing those two amounts together, because there's only one box for paid and there's only one box for tender type. So just make it a holistic experience here. So at this point, we've received $2,300 for our melt. And even though we received a cash deposit and a personal check, we're just going to mark it as a personal check to kind of get that view, because there's no way to break it up into two different tender types. So the next thing to note is that once we click save, this is going to close out our bucket. Now, this little warning sign does come up because this type of transaction can't be voided or altered in any way. So you do want to make sure that everything is correct before moving forward. So if you want to go back and just double check it, you can easily hit canceled. It's not been processed. You can make any tweaks or adjustments to the payment if you need to. Remove that invoice number if you accidentally posted it, because once it's posted, it's done. You can't do anything further with this particular transaction. So we're going to go ahead and hit save. We are fully done with this, so we're going to hit approve. So once this payment is posted and we fully close it out, we are going to basically get all of those items that are in that scrap bucket, and they are going to be sold out of your store. So no longer in your active inventory. It marks that bucket as closed, and this scrap report prints automatically. So at the top, you will see the details of your bucket. It will outline the vendor it was sent to, as well as a little financial snapshot of payments received, gross profit, and profit percentage. So pretty strong scrap. The acquired just basically gives everything in your scrap bucket what's been added there. Total weight, your assay, that kind of stuff. Shipping is just going to basically say that when we marked it as shipped, we reweighed it. Here's everything we thought we could have, as well as saying, hey, based on what's in your bucket and what gold is going for the day you're shipping it, this is what we think you should be getting from your scrap, which is super cool to kind of be able to see, because then you can kind of anticipate how your financials are going to be for that month. So if you need to bump up your sales, it gives you that little bump since you know what you can expect from your scrap. Next, you'll find the vendor confirmed or any flags. So we did see a slight discrepancy in our assay with that little percentage here. finally, our closing section basically expands on that financial summary that we saw at the top of our list to basically include things like blended costs of the items in that bucket. And there's also a section here for anything that has been returned back to your store. So you can kind of see anything that you need that has been added back into your inventory. Lastly, we do have the accuracy and discrepancy analysis, which just breaks down metal, diamond, stone weight, blended cost for each one of those, and kind of just make sure that the weight and the assays are accurate or if there's any variance there. At the very bottom, excuse me, at the very bottom of the list, we do have an outline of every single item that was part of that scrap bucket. So at that point, you'll be able to see every single thing. It gives you a clean item by item breakdown, all in one report. So it's a super cool report. Okie dokie. So let's see, we are back into our deck here. We're gonna head to our very last section of today. Oh, I almost forgot. I also want to show you what it looks like to add something back into your inventory, just in case you do want to add your diamonds from your scrap back in. So we had a bucket that was already assayed for our platinum bucket. So we're going to hop in there and we're going to finalize that bucket. So we're going to basically say we've completed this transaction, we've gotten paid. We're going to put in $1,000, personal check, and now we're going to input our invoice number. So what this is basically saying is how much metal has returned and what's the metal type. So since there's no diamonds attached to this, we can just say maybe a portion of it was sent back to us. So we're going to say metal weight returned was 1.5 grams, and it was that same platinum 9.5 that we got. So when we click save, this is now going to ask you, hey, there's a cost reallocation. So based on what you had in the cost of your other item, we want to know how much you want to move into this new piece. So if you really didn't have anything that you were bringing back into your inventory and this little window pops up, you know that you've accidentally tried to add more inventory into your store than you want to, and you can easily click cancel and then delete out anything in this field so that you can close it out without adding inventory back into your store. So if we did want to go through total cost and metal of the stones must be 73. We are going to change it. So this is just going to move $50 of cost into this new piece. And the $23 will be the cost of what's going to be assigned to this particular bucket. So once we hit OK, again, it's going to give you that little warning sign that something can't be changed or altered once we hit approve. I'm going to hit approved because I am bringing that item back into our store, and that item is going to now be this inventory number, and it's going to be in our priced items queue for us to price and put out into our sales floor or in our safe. So we are done there. And here it will update that spot of items received back into our store. Here's that item. Accuracy. Oh, right, here we go. Closing details received back right here with that new inventory number. Okay. So now we are going to wrap things up by talking about where you can find scrap reporting in Bravo, because tracking your scrap is just as important as processing it. So we just went over that full scrap report, which is the one that prints out automatically when you close your scrap bucket. So we're not really going to dive into that report again, but if you do need to reference it or reprint it later, I just want to show you that you absolutely 100% can do this. So you can find that report by heading back to that same area where you've been creating your bucket, which is going to be inventory, scrap refining process. Now this opens up to your open buckets and open statuses. So we're going to hover over this status column, click on the key, and that's going to allow us to select all of our statuses or even just select one of them. So I only want to look at our closed bucket. This is the one I want to reprint, so I'm going to highlight it and click OK. This is going to open up that bucket where you can head to that right side menu and print your scrap report. So if you accidentally lost it, you can't find it, you can always get back to it. Now, I did want to take a look at a few of Bravo's standard built-in reports. So right from Bravo's dashboard, we do have two reports that do show your scrap information. The very first one we have is store KPIs, which basically pulls up a snapshot of your store's performance. This will include scrap totals a little bit lower down in the report, but I did want to highlight up top what this means. So the first column will show your current year totals. Next to that, we have what you did last year. Then we have everything you did for the day before, so yesterday's date, and then everything that has been rolled up into April so far. And then from that point on, it acts like month-to-date totals with a 13-month trend. So at this point, this is a really great report and tool to be able to compare year-over-year performance, month-over-month performance. Now, I did want to highlight that the figures on this report is for the store that you're logged into and will also only show data that is run up to yesterday's date. So it won't include anything that you did today for business. So even though we processed scrap today, it's not going to show on this report until tomorrow. So down at the very bottom, we have our scrap sales here. So the first column is what we've done so far this year. The second column is what we did for all of last year. So as you can see, we're definitely scrapping more this year than we did last year. We didn't perform any scrap the day before. And then here is the scrap that we did for all of April, and then so on and so forth with each prior month. Now, with our company KPIs, this will basically open up where you can select a specific date range. So I'm not going to do the full month. I'm just going to do for the last week. And on this report, it gives you a snapshot of your company's performance. So if you are in a multi-store operation, the date range is going to be the data that you show that's shown. Also, same as the store KPI, it won't include anything from today. It will only be available if a closed store was completed for the prior day. So for scrap, we're going to go ahead and scroll on down to our scrap section, and we have two of them. This first section is going to show everything that you've scrapped within that date range that we've selected. So from April 8th through today, or should I say yesterday. And then the one below it is going to be actual month-to-date figures. So everything that we've done in April. And that first column is going to show a holistic view of the company. And then from the columns next to it is going to be each store within that company and their performance. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to head over to our report section in Bravo. So navigate to the right side menu, down to reports. And we have two that we're going to look at under our closing reports. The first one is going to be our end of day consolidated report. Now, this will include your daily revenue, which I'm going to use the store we were actually working with so that you can see that it does roll up there. So reports, end of day consolidated, and this is for today's date. So when we pull this up, it's going to basically, the scrap that you've done is going to include in your daily revenue and your cost of goods sold. So this first page is pawn activity. This will roll up under your sales activity for non-taxable sales. So here is our items there. Let's see, what else do we have here? So although it doesn't appear by name like scrap, you'll know that it is part of it through your non-taxable sales. Also, it does blend the cost with all of the other sales from that day. So your cost of goods sold will be everything from scrap and from, just your natural sales. The next thing that we have is going to be your end of month spreadsheet. So if we head right below the consolidated to end of month, this one is great for a broader view. So it shows your daily activity across all things like payments, loans, sales, and it does include scrap. There we go. Again, rolling up to that non-taxable sales. This one is one that will basically have to be closed or it won't update until tomorrow. So end of day has to be done, your close of store has to be done, and the report will be available for tomorrow. So we have the non-taxable sales here, which will reflect any non-taxable sales, including your scrap. And then on page 2, where you have your inventory base, this is going to basically show how things affect your inventory. So with your scrap, the refined cost of sales will affect your inventory because it's basically removing those things from your active inventory. So for the month, we've removed 6 items for a total of 1922 as of yesterday. Now, if you want to see an expanded version of that page 2, the place to go would be your inventory base report, which will be under the second section of inventory reports. So if we go ahead and head into our inventory base, you can select a range for your report. And then from here, this is an expanded version of that page 2. So the reason why I say it's expanded is because it gives you a day-by-day breakdown of how and what is added to your inventory or removed. So the very beginning column here is going to be what you started the day off in your inventory balance. And then if you see things in here, a positive number will add to it, a negative number will remove from it. And then at the very end here, it's going to show you what your ending inventory balance is for that particular day. This is another report that does require the store to be closed in order for the new day to show. So you won't be able to see it update today. You will be able to see everything from the prior day. All right, and I think there's only one other report I did want to show, and that is going to be one from our Bravo Reporting Pro. So if you or your teams have Bravo Reporting Pro as part of your product lineup, there is a really great report called the Scrap Refining Analysis, and you will find it in your operational reports. Now, the great thing about this is operational. I already clicked on it, and Scrap Refining Analysis. So the great thing about this report is that it is not limited to a specific store. You could look at a store-by-store basis, but you can also look at all of the stores in your company for a date range. So let's say we're going to go back to March 1st through today. We do have to select all of the batches that we want to look at. So if you want one, select one. If you want multiple, select the multiple. When we click View Report, this is going to give us all of the company totals at the top, as well as the store level totals per location with each individual item that was added to the scrap, as well as the multiple scrap batches that has been done within that store. So the cool thing about this is that this is one of the only built-in reports that pulls together all of this information in one spot. Otherwise, you'd have to go piece by piece. So individual scrap report to pull up these specific details. In here, it's all in one spot. Now with this, it does also show up top your total cost with the average sale in here. And with that sale, it's going to basically take it and blend or like take a portion of it and assign it to each piece within that particular bucket. So that's kind of how that one does work. So whether you're using Bravo's built-in reports or pretty much just taking it further with Reporting Pro, you've got everything you could possibly need to stay on top of your scrap process from start to finish. All righty. So now I would love to open it up and hear from you. What questions do you have? Or of course, if there's anything you'd like to dig into a little bit deeper, just let me know in the chat. I do see some chats in here. It'd be very helpful and save time to have the ability to add all scrap list items to the metal thing. I will definitely roll that up to our development team as a recommendation. What if you receive bullion like 10 ounces of 1 old gold buffaloes? And then coins and bullion to scrap. I can definitely ask about that, Steve, to see if this is something that they have any plans to make a scrappable category in the future. Now, if you are receiving bullion or coins and you plan on selling them out, the easiest way to basically do it is just pull your vendor up as a sale and then just sell it out to them as a tax exempt sale. And of course, this one's not open just yet. So let me pull this open. So we're pulling our vendor into our transaction screen. I didn't have any coins queued up, so I'm just going to type in coins into our drop-down retail smart search to search our active inventory. And I'm going to take this coin, add it into our sale. I'm going to mark it as tax exempt. And then from there, just basically sell it out as you would a regular sale. More detail about the area below the blue line. Receive cash and bullion back for scrap sale. Okay, so at that point, so one of the things that we could do for scrap, so receive cash and bullion back. So if you're receiving cash and then more items, you can basically take that blue line. And I'm guessing, Mark, that's what you were asking about, more detail below that blue line. For instance, if you're receiving cash and bullion back. So that makes more sense now that I can see that all together. Yes, wonderful. Okay. I'm not going to lie, when I just said that, it reminded me of Chris from Family Guy, where he's like, wonderful, because you do look bonita. All right. So we're just going to go ahead and click on this one here. And we're going to basically say that we've received money back. we've got, and I'm just going to cheat by looking at my scrap report just to see how much we should be getting back. And in this one, it's saying we should get about $1,400. So let's say we've received $700 in cash from our vendor, and we're also receiving $700 worth of bullion from our customer. So we're going to go ahead and enter our invoice number here. And we're going to say that we've returned, we'll say 31.1 grams because we received one, and it is 24 carat. And at this point, it won't roll up to Bravo as a bullion piece. It would just basically be as gold. Would that be an issue in your store, Mark? Because the other thing we could do is basically pay it off and then do a vendor purchase. So those are our kind of options. You can bring it in as jewelry category, or you can basically pay off your entire scrap bucket and then add in as vendor purchase. Needs to be shown as an item that goes into inventory. Yes. So a vendor purchase would still show as an item that is going into inventory, just like this item would too. So I'll show you how to add this item back in, and then we'll also show you how to add a vendor item from your refiner. So we're going to go ahead and say 700 is for this amount to be paid here. So now we are basically adding $700 worth of stuff into this one item. Here is our new piece, which will now roll up into our priced items queue. And head to price items. And we're only going to look for something that we did today. There we go. Here's our item where we can run it through our estimator. You can basically freeform to say like 1 ounce gold bullion. And then you can definitely bring it in that way with that remaining $700 cost from that bucket going to that piece. So that's one way to do it. It's not necessarily that bullion isn't going to be in the category bullion that Bravo puts it in, because Bravo puts coins and bullion into general merchandise, whereas you can only basically bring in inventory from a scrap into the jewelry category. Now, the other option would be to close out your scrap completely and then head to stock management. Wouldn't you use Bravo for? Yes, typically you would use general merchandise for bullion and Bravo, but when you're doing scrap, if you're bringing items back in from your scrap, it doesn't allow you to add to general merchandise from there. So if you do want it to roll up into that bullion category, instead of adding it back in from your scrap, you can just leave all of the blue line below blank and then head to your stock management in order to add a receiving for that gold bullion. So head to item inventory, add general merchandise. So from there, we're going to just hit up the estimator, start typing in what we have. And then you can basically add this item into your inventory back from your refiner, but just kind of doing it as a vendor purchase as opposed to receiving it back from scrap, only because of that general merchandise jewelry category thing. If there aren't any other questions, we'll go ahead and close this session out by saying thank you so much for joining us today. We do host different webinars every Wednesday and Thursday. So if you did find this helpful, come hang out with us again. Each session is packed with tips, walkthroughs, real support to help you get the most out of Bravo, And we're just here to just make sure that you and your teams feel confident using Bravo. Um, so we hope to see you next time. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. All right. Bye.